Alright, there's going to be a wonderful Heptacraft match recommended to me. Someone said it was a decent game. Now, I don't really know how true that is, but I figure we'd give this individual the benefit of the doubt, who shall remain nameless. So we have Cow here, picking Raiders, against a potential Dominion, Nerazim, and Covenant. Oh, look at him, he messed up the 9. What a fucking loser! But anyway. Okay, so he ended up getting Raiders against Nerazim, so, well, he only picked Raiders, so it's kind of a little bit of a meta where you could pick multiple races, so you have to plan builds for multiple races, because this mod is terrible like that. But yeah, we have Nerazim in the top right. So this is a map that, because I haven't played a ton of the new maps, I guess I'm just that sort of individual. It doesn't seem too crazy. I've had a few maps on here, but nothing stood out as particularly exceptional to me in this map. There are the narrow chokes, the spokes, as it were, kind of going off into the center, and a lot of opportunity for side movement along here. So we'll see what sort of plan Raiders wants to do. I think, actually, I already know the plan Raiders is going to do. Oh, actually, he doesn't know, though, because he has not scouted which race his opponent is, because he has 3. So, looks like he's sending out a scout of some sort. There's this gas right up to the cybernetic square. So the Nerazim player, Patcharoo, here is completely aware that his opponent is Raiders, but the Raiders' opponent is not aware of what race his opponent is. The quick fanatic here. It's not bad against Raiders. You can kind of just punch them all in. And interestingly enough, the shields for this race, they're essentially 2 Protoss races. You could loosely think of them as the Brood War race and the StarCraft 2 race. Ooh, he had that on attack move, and now he's gonna waste time. This is a temporary unit here. It's kind of like a mule, except it just repairs. So it's an interesting option, to be sure. But a lot of times it takes energy here. You give up an extra supply to essentially get the free scout. And you can see it's on a timer here. But yeah, the cow's clicking all over the place there, looking at the base. So it looks like a 2-gate build. Starting with the depths rather than stalkers, it's a little cheeky. Not a lot here in the way of... It's a little odd to see a bunker so soon. I wonder if he's planning to tech up. Well, I mean, against a 2-gate build, it's hard to say. Some things have changed about the way each of the races work recently, and that you need an academy to get some advanced units, but you can still add the reactor. But once you get the academy, you can double produce the advanced units, and there's the supply call down there, giving him 300 mineral supply depot thing kind of instantly, in return for not having another scout. So the 2-gate build, I mean, with the depths, I don't really see this working too well because there's a wall in. I think stalkers would be better for pressuring this, but with the bunker, it kind of shuts down everything. Going too aggressive against something like this can definitely be... I don't know what he was doing there. Maybe he's just experimenting with this. And here's the warp robo. This will let him get an oracle and scout, so he can kind of see what's going on behind the wall. And yeah, interesting here. The siege tank actually does require an armory now, and the reactors to double produce. So the tech has definitely changed a bit for Raiders. It's essentially, recently, I should say, it's been changed to slow down a bit in the beginning, but then quickly pick up, since the quick speed and kind of mass production is interesting. And here comes that oracle. So he is going to see, okay, this looks like a mech build of some kind. Alright. He sees the bunker. Probably assumes it has marines, I'm sure, and the 3 marines in it. And there you go. No expansion or anything being made. So it looks like Cow's actually going straight for a starport of some kind. Maybe he looks to do some kind of cheeky harass with banshees and the like. And the adepts aren't really going to do much with this. It looks like there was a little fight somewhere in here, but probably just something minor, I imagine. Interesting thing again, like this pressure isn't going to work. There's like a bunker, right? Maybe without the bunker, that would totally beat up some marines. Is he looking for maybe an expansion? No, he's just being silly and not going the right way. So here's the Oracle, again looking for stuff on a warp prism. So I guess he's looking to do some sort of like aggressive maneuver, so the bunker definitely can kind of work out here. And here's the armory with all of its spewing of tech. It is interesting, but getting that siege tech and that bunker, definitely negating the bunker by jumping up here with that. So here I was making fun of him. So kind of a front bust in conjunction with a sort of back attack here. Didn't go so well because adepts, are like, what's the bunker? And it's armored, I'm pretty sure. And even if it's not, it's a 300 health, and adepts don't exactly do a ton of damage to it. So, because I know buildings are definitely not light. I'm pretty sure all buildings are considered armored. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Who knows? Okay, so it's kind of staying on one base. This has been our, I want to say the meta, but in reality, it's hard to say since we don't have a massive group of people playing game. We're a small, tight-knit community here, but the idea of getting more of a staying on one base is a little more viable than in regular StarCraft 2. At the naturally, there are less patches, 7, whereas in your main there are 24 patches, or 24 workers, I should say, you can have to it. So the main is, and it does last longer. It's similar to brood war mining style. So in this case, it's okay to kind of stay on one base a little longer. And sometimes if an opponent is trying to expand quickly, you can punish them for it. Get a little damage, maybe even kill or delay their expansion entirely. Or delay or kill their expansion entirely, I should say. And this Viking's just kind of being a bully to the scout. It's not cloaked like an observer, so it kind of just has to run around. Interesting, though, is that now Vikings... the armory upgrades apply to both vehicles and ship, so Vikings can fill a role. An interesting change recently that I think helps Raiders a lot. Basically being able to get like upgrades for all of your ground factory units and still be able to use a Viking, which is, can be kind of a core unit if you let it. It's just that generally Vikings falling on the ground is kind of like, well, what's the point in doing this when you can do something else? But alas. So Nerazim, whatever, expanded a little sooner. Income's probably not that different. Actually, wow. Were workers killed? 3, but it's kind of peculiar that he's so far behind. I guess Patcharoo just isn't good at the game. Hitting the E button after selecting his Nexus is just a little too much for him, I suppose. But his Terran's kind of out econing him right now. And some of this map movement, a lot of zealots and adepts. It's acceptable, but I have some doubts as to whether a break can really work once things get a little further ahead, especially if like a bunker is placed in the front. Once you realize there's a lot of zealots, but fanatics, they actually move a lot faster than you might expect. Their move speed is pretty quick, even without a charge upgrade, so they can keep up with things like stalkers, which are now just a general purpose unit in Heptacraft. StarCraft 2, they're a little different. So again, another scout here, expansion. It seems like, is he looking for a break? I like this, patrolling stuff to make sure nothing cheeky's going on, and shooing away the Oracle with a Typhoon. It's kind of a dedicated anti-air unit at this point. Really good range and stuff. That's mostly armored, but it can shoot really fast. It mostly deals with armored. Not really too much going on. That Dark Council with Blink is kind of just a thing. Most Nerazim end up going into 2 turrets at the front. That's kind of intriguing. I wonder why. Maybe he just wants to get rid of the Oracle. But there's that third base that I wasn't paying attention to because I'm not very good at this game. There's no sound. Let's turn up the sound. It's like it feels so... There we go. This is it. Okay, good old Adept just sneaking in, putting up his wall. Alright, so here comes the bust. There are a lot of tanks here. One interesting thing about Raiders is most Town Hall abilities here end up having something defensive. Raiders actually don't. So it's kind of an interesting break here, but it didn't really go so well. If you knew this was here, this would definitely be worth it. But without knowing that's there, a little bit of a misstep, I guess. Okay. I mean, not the worst thing. Definitely wants to hit that with a few stalkers and move away. It's like you can. I found with Nerazim a lot of times against like mech builds, you can kind of clear away one part, but then there's just a chunk of mech remaining. So, being this is a two base oriented build against a three base, all Cow really has to do is hold out here. It's a shame he didn't. Patcharoo didn't scout this base here because he's kind of got away with that for free. He completely broke the front. Would have done him well to scout that, poor bastard. And yeah, it looks like again just factory tech going into armories. Armories again, they upgrade. They do research similar to a machine shop now. It's all kind of on the armory. So getting a second one, not only can you upgrade the things you want, like the techs you want, but you can also end up switching that into going double upgrades later on. Which this is a much more macro-oriented play, kind of three bases, some factories here. You kind of pump out units when you need them. Don't necessarily need to be producing out of all of them at all the time unless you have the money. But again, now that he has very saturated bases, I imagine it's something he does want to go for. So a lot of ooh, no detector here. The mines actually end up doing less to light, so a bit of a saving grace here since Nerazim aren't playing Kala, take 1,000,000 damage on their dragoons. The mines are a little more gentle. He's researching the disruptor speed, so I guess he wants to use disruptors. I personally find disruptors a little hard to use against tanks because they're Brood War tanks as opposed to SC2 tanks, so that can be a little difficult, especially with like vultures being able to move around and it's just like, but yeah, you can like blast a bunch of vultures, but they're kind of quick and tanks have a lot of range. So here is an Oracle just kind of cruising around. I don't really know what he's looking for. It's like, well, yeah, he's going mech. I'm probably macroing. Maybe just, okay, well, there it is. He's dead. So there's a little bit of movement. Again, vultures probably aren't going to get too caught out by anything except for stalkers. Funnily, there's a lot of zealots here. I wonder if he's like still trying to do more of a break. And again, this whole side here is just completely open. It looks like Cow is putting some mines down here to sort of hold that, but a few flanks, a couple stalkers, maybe a detector here, and start harassing this, force some of these, because again, this area is covered here, but there's no siege tank fire here, so some stalkers to get rid of those mines would easily shut that down, delay it. It looks like Cow is taking another base, and definitely needs to up his scouting game here, Mr. Nerazim. At least he has weapons, I guess. And the Terran upgrades, there's just 2 armor, or 2 weapons, so a little bit of a sad ball here. What's this? He's researching the warp prism speed. I guess that's a pretty good upgrade. He utilizes warp prisms. I'm much more of a Brood War player, and I'm like stuck and don't utilize a lot of the SC2 mechanics. I'm like, this is just weird that I can teleport my units across the map and punch someone in the face. So some of these tanks finally coming out, but again, they're still a little uncovered there. Could be difficult, but these narrow pathways probably deter attacks enough. And it looks like he is still not attacking this. That's great. Still very low stalker count. Kind of odd. Having a lot of fanatics. I mean, fanatics do work against tanks, but oh, how much you want to bet he's just gonna walk into this? Ooh, okay, there we go. So he did push in here, but thankfully the zealots don't take too much damage from the tanks. And yeah, okay, he definitely found his way in here, pushing up on the tanks some more. Because again, a lot of these tanks just aren't covering each other, so this ends up working pretty well. And the vultures weren't necessarily here either. The interesting thing about tanks is that they only do 57 damage to stalkers. I don't believe stalkers are considered armor, they're just neutral. So vultures actually do decent damage to them. It's a little bit different from if you played Brood War, the standardized kind of mech composition that you would end up seeing in those matches. Ooh, Tempest here. These are cheeky. They're not similar. They're similar to the SC2 Tempest, but they have 10 range, and they're kind of slow and clunky, not a very swift unit. So sort of they're kind of more like a Guardian in that way. If you imagine a Guardian could attack air and ground, but because the main fighting force, like the main range unit here, ends up being the Stalker, which again not armored. You kind of need to combine vultures and tanks to sort of deal with them. Whereas against Kala, which are the Brood War variant of Protoss, very similar, it's much more about having the tanks deal with the armored whereas the vultures just kind of get in the way, and they block for the tanks, so to speak, and their mines. But in this case, vultures are actually pretty good for damage against the Nerazim, which is something that I think, if you approach the matchup from a similar standpoint, I know Cow personally here, and he does know a bit about Brood War. And he kind of handles this the same way a Brood War Terran would. And it's a Protoss, you get mech. A lot of good gates here. Minerals a little low. The Cow is just like expanded everywhere, and has definitely out-expanded his opponent. His opponent's not very good in dealing with these bases that are completely, unabashedly unprotected. It's like, if you could just grab like 3 zealots and send him right here. Looks like that's what he's doing, but no, I being critical because I'm so good at the game, right? Okay, so siege tanks up here. This is going to be kind of a hard position to deal with, though. He has kind of done the sneaky switch. They are similar somewhat to the way in Brood War how instead of carriers, right, you get Tempests, and it's kind of an interesting way that functions because you can just sort of get blindsided by them, like, oh wow, I've been focusing on tanks and vultures so much here, and then suddenly there's just these air units that can do a lot of damage from really far away. So that's a little annoying to have to deal with. So that push I think it died a little. Without those Tempests, I'm not sure how well that would have functioned. But here we go. This is what I want to see. These fanatics getting in there and punching SCVs. The vultures can kind of quickly reinforce here. Definitely good to kind of do this and slow him down. Now, is he going to attack the heavily fortified front, would give very little reward, or is he going to attack the unprotected bases? No, he's definitely going to attack the heavily fortified front and lose a lot of guys. I mean, he blinked in what? Not exactly worth it, right? That was like 12 or 15 stalkers for like a tank and some vultures, so not worth. Looks like minerals are getting pretty high here for both players. Cow is not necessarily producing more factories, more stuff here in general. He has some factories here. I guess he's running low on space. Here comes a bit of a vulture raid. The Zealots here get a teleport move. I guess that's from StarCraft 2. They were like, Zealots suck, so let's just make them teleport. Interesting. And again, vultures kind of coming out here and just getting shut down. I'm not really sure what this is all about. Again, just mining for free here, getting extra income though. Not spending it. And more Zealots just kind of coming in, streaming in. Again, it's the chaos of combat at this point, right? You can't necessarily do everything you want to when you're just being attacked all the time. Viking's pretty good air-to-air. 2 attacks, both for 18 damage, so they do well against armored, which I believe the Tempest is. So, pretty decent push here. A lot of these units in the back, I think, kind of just sitting there as opposed to moving around, but hey, that happens. When we look at the income, it's definitely stabilized somewhat. I think Terran could be bumped down a notch, but again, the minerals aren't necessarily being spent, so you kind of imagine these bases here as not existing for now until those minerals get down a little lower. But the supply for Terran is definitely much higher macro in general. Here, it looks like... yeah, okay, I was going to say. He has Typhoons to deal with these Tempests, but quite a few Typhoons, and the Typhoons don't attack ground. They are strictly an anti-air unit. So they're just like a super specialist Goliath, except they're probably better than Goliath at anti-air, truth be told. He has a lot of them. Looks like he was expecting a lot more Tempests. So that does work somewhat in Patch's favor here, our Nerazim player. And here come the Zealots again, just being rude. Punching stuff. I wonder if a set of vultures, if he can actually spare this. Because leaving these tanks undefended, to the stalkers, they're not entirely sieged here. But there are still some vultures and cyclones to kind of get in the way. A lot of these tanks actually aren't sieged, which is okay, given the fact that the stalkers can teleport up there. And again, those vultures coming to deal with the melee units, some of them kind of not going in. A little bit of cheeky stuff. Looks like he teleported into the base here from the low ground. Getting battle cruisers out. This is an interesting thing. They actually cost Nerazim all the capital ships. That little 75 blue thing there in your Nerazim production is just at a fixed rate. This lovely purple canister here. But because the vehicle and air upgrades are shared, you can often get to the situation where you can still sort of field somewhat of an air force. It's not quite as effective as StarCraft 2. It's more Brood War in that respect. But being able to field that Air Force is interesting. It gives you a lot of potential options. And for example, Banshees actually do somewhat decent damage. They have splash and 30 damage in a line, so there is some potential for them to help. In a ground fight, not necessarily to tank hits directly in the front, but they do definitely do decent splash. And it looks like this is going to be the end for our good Nerazim friend here. He put up a good fight. I think some of those bases, the harassment, he chose some strange points here and there. But that looks like it's going to conclude this. An interesting game, to be sure. I definitely would like to see more of it. It's an interesting matchup, too, Nerazim against Raiders. One of the more fun ones to watch. And shame that it ended up kind of going the way it did. But, alas, I suppose that is going to wrap it up for me. Hopefully we'll be looking at doing more of these if we get decent games in. So, yeah.